Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Careers. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Cash Forecasting and the Rolling Forecast, Myths, Realities, Best Practices. I would like to thank our webinar partner, Centage, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Cloud computing and big data finally make cash forecasting and leveraging a rolling forecast easy, right? Not by a long shot. Forecasting remains a process filled with inefficiency, mystery, and information that can lead to less than optimal working capital allocation in addition to other suboptimal strategic decision making. Implementing a rolling forecast introduces new complications to a forecasting process. Today, you will discover 10 best practices in cash forecasting, 7 rolling forecast success factors, and identify specific opportunities to impact the value delivered by the forecasting efforts at your company. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Careers, cover a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to review our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of our value proposition to you in investing an hour of your valuable time with us today. Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success. A plethora of Treasury job opportunities on our sister company, treasuryjobs.com. On treasurycareers.com, you will find many Treasury certification resources and Treasury best practices and upcoming complimentary webinars like our webinar today. Now on to the exciting housekeeping items. The slides are available under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. I see a few of you are having issues with downloading the handouts. If so, please send me an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. For those of you interested in CTP credit, you'll need to answer all of the polling questions during the webinar and remain on for the duration of the webinar. Any questions about CTP credit, please send me an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. We'd love to hear from you today, so I'd appreciate your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to get to your questions at the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. Fear not, if I do not get to your question, I will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. What are our learning objectives today? I'd like you to be able to have separated cash flow forecasting myths from reality and define what a successful cash flow forecast looks like at your company. To be able to revise specific areas of your cash forecasting process to improve the quality of short and long-term cash forecasts at your company, and to understand how rolling forecasts done right improve strategic planning and deliver business agility. Now, how are we going to accomplish our objectives today? Well, we're going to start off with why cash forecasting matters. The reason that we're going to do that is that in order to get yourself to be best in class in terms of the value offered by cash forecasting, it's often going to involve an investment in people, process, and technology, and we want to give you the tools for that business case. We're going to go through some cash forecasting myths. We're going to talk about how to define your cash forecasting process and framework, and this is really very important in the foundation of that effective cash forecast. You have to have your process and framework right, otherwise you're putting tremendous inherent barriers into the success of your cash forecast. And we'll talk about cash forecasting accuracy, which I don't think really gets the attention it deserves in cash forecasting presentations. I'll review very high level rolling forecasts. More importantly, 7 keys to success. We'll talk about how to identify your cash forecasting resource needs. So just like a lot of the other topics that I cover, I like to be able to empower people to know where you are, that assessment, and then where you want to be, and then how to get there. And then in terms of how we get there, first we need to remove the inherent barriers that are in place. So sometimes when we do an assessment, it can look like we're climbing Mount Everest, when in fact, if we remove inherent barriers, it's not so much of a climb. And so we'll talk about some of the inherent barriers to cash forecasting success. We'll talk about our 10 cash forecasting best practices, which we will have gotten from a great presentation at the 2017 AFP Annual Conference. And then I'll offer some final thoughts and resources. So we have a lot of ground to cover, so buckle your seatbelts. Let's take a minute to level set your expectations for the webinar. I myself have experienced dozens of cash forecasting presentations as a Treasury practitioner and a consultant. And there are times where I was honestly disappointed in certain cases. And that may have been based on my expectation for the presentations. So let me level set expectations a bit before I delve into the content. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to fix all that is not optimal in your cash forecasting efforts, but you will be armed with information to assess where you're at, where you want to go, and gain an understanding of what it might take to get you there. And you'll also be able to make the connections and access the resources you need on your journey to optimize the strategic value of cash forecasting at your company. So, again, those of you who have heard me speak before know I'd like to keep it simple, and I like to add a little humor here. So in regards to keeping it simple, again, why does cash forecasting matter? It impacts our borrowing and investment decisions. Poor cash forecasting leads to poor borrowing and investment decisions. I think even more important if you're a net borrower, it can impact our debt covenant compliance risk, impact our working capital efficiency. It increases visibility in the sources and uses of cash along with the associated costs and benefits if done right. It impacts financial agility and operational agility. These are really key in today's world. We need to be able to react in real time. And one of the reasons is that the playing field is really being leveled in terms of technology. A lot of the cloud-based solutions out there, small companies have access to the same levels of technology. So we need to be able to react and respond in real time. And there's also an increased focus on cash balances and cash deployment efficiencies at investors and also at that CFO level as well. And the other reason why I think cash forecasting and cash flow forecasting matters more now is we're starting to see more attention to the cash conversion cycle. So what I'm starting to see is a lot of attention being paid to, on the right side of the graph, we're really getting into this accounts payable automation, all the way from onboarding our suppliers, all the way to payments optimization, which we talked about yesterday. And then on the other side of it, what we're going to talk about next month is AR automation and artificial intelligence. So we're really looking to be able to take control and own that cash conversion cycle. And so that cash forecasting, the effective cash forecasting, these technologies are going to allow us to do a much better job of forecasting those cash flows, and that's going to improve our decision making and really owning that working capital optimization and cash conversion cycle. So it's a very exciting time in Treasury, and especially in AP and AR, and it's very exciting. So those of you who are Treasury practitioners right now, I envy you. Back in the day, we didn't have all this great technology, and it's fascinating for me to keep up on the trends. So a few cash forecasting myths. These may be a little old. Some of you that know or may have forgotten more about cash forecasting than I have, but there are some of you that are kind of new. And again, I like to keep it simple. So if nothing else, it's always good to take a look back, take a look at what you're doing, why you're doing it, look at that foundation, see if it's strong, see if it needs to be changed. So there's still a perception out there, the benchmark of cash forecasting is how close you get to 100% accuracy. Well, that is not true. In many cases, it's not even possible to get to 100% accuracy due to the nature of the information and variables that are affecting that cash. So it's not even possible. And then you also need to look at that cost-benefit analysis. So one of the things that you want to do is you'll want to target the level of accuracy that makes sense for your company. So what level of accuracy is really going to impact decisions at our company? So if I'm 5% more accurate, what does that mean to my company? How does it impact the bottom line cost productivity? And so that is a myth. So that you need to set your goalpost, 100% accuracy. More importantly is to be able to have a metric of what that accuracy is and put in place a culture of continuous improvement. Another myth, the more data the better in terms of cash forecasting success. Not necessarily true. As we all know, garbage in, garbage out. And you want to really understand the key drivers of your cash forecasting accuracy. So sometimes I've seen companies just throw everything in the kitchen sink, and then they end up losing a lot of the value of their cash forecasting. For example, If you're using a regression analysis, you can just dump as many variables in there as you like. It's really much more valuable to focus on those, depending on your company, of course, 3, 5, 6, 7 drivers, and really look at those drivers and forecasting them and getting them into your cash forecasting process. Another myth, the more complicated the statistical method used, the better the cash forecast. Absolutely not true. Again, it depends on the timing, the flow of your forecast. I like to tell my story. You may have heard this one before. Some of you people out there in the audience, I used to work at a submersible motor manufacturer, got out of school, had my quantitative analysis, went in there, said, all right, I'm gonna, and this is manufacturing, so I apologize, it wasn't cash, it was submersible motors. I said, I'm gonna forecast submersible motors, I'm gonna reinvent the wheel here. So the product manager goes, okay, you go ahead and do that. So we had a little contest. Well, needless to say, probably he was much more accurate than I was. They had a simple rolling average forecast, and it did really well. And they knew all the predictors, they knew the seasonality, and so more complicated is not always better. And of course, this again seems like common sense, but technology, the myth is technology is magic and is a key to an effective forecast, and that's absolutely not the case. Again, it depends on your objectives. And so you may not need the latest and greatest in terms of technology and functionality to accomplish your objectives. Now, that's not to say that the wrong technology can't be an inherent barrier for your company, but technology is not magic. So again, I like to keep it simple. Just this overview I love from my friend Tim Hessler from a presentation he gave at the AFP annual conference. So as many of you well know, we've been doing this a long time, talking about cash forecasting, and you'll see when I find things that I like, I address them, I reference them, and I really put them out there. Like I said, I've seen so many presentations that when I see something that I like, I really like to share that so other folks don't have to go through the pain of going through this process. But again, if you're in the process, if you're looking at just doing this or a re-engineering project, to take these steps back, sometimes it turns the light bulb on, right? So when I used to go to my children's school and they were like in 3rd grade and I'd see things on the board, like for business, I thought they were awesome. Like be nice to each other, listen. So sometimes when you look at the cash forecasting process, you might say, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's go back and look at that. So again, courtesy of my friend Tim Hessler, 1, identify your business objectives. Prioritize company-defined cash forecasting. We'll talk about this in a little while. What are your goals? Liquidity management. Is it short-term? Is it long-term? Are we trying to forecast daily cash for investment purposes? Are we trying to forecast out 3 to 5 years for the balance sheet? You want to know what your requirements are. What are the goals of the cash forecast? What are the techniques we want to take a look at? The analysis, how do you understand your current business factors and forecasting drivers? Again, forecasting drivers, don't get carried away. And the other thing regarding forecasting drivers, those can certainly be dynamic, and you want to verify those. You want to make sure that you keep looking at those and making sure that those are really the drivers that are driving the variances in your forecast and are really what are translating into the drivers of your company's financial metrics. You want to determine the level of detail, right? Do you need to go to line item forecast? We'll talk about this a little bit. Direct, indirect, implementation. What's the support? Present an outline, activities, and then measurement. Ensure iterations for constant improvement. So again, I like these keep it simple, some building blocks. And sometimes some of you will be like, you're a little bit all over the place here, but it's one of the things I'm trying to do is present a wealth of content. Again, there's a lot of different levels of expertise on the call, and I want to make sure that I offer value to each of you. So one of my objectives for the webinar is for everyone to take an action. And one of those actions I hope you take is one of the following. Print out the slides, print out parts of the slides, ask me a question during the Q&A, give me a LinkedIn connection request, go out and join a LinkedIn group relative to cash forecasting or Treasury. Have a meeting with someone, your CFO, those involved in your cash forecasting. So take that action. If you all take that action, I will have delivered value to you. I guarantee it. And when you look back at the webinar, you'll be like, webinar was a little bit different, but it made me take an action. And that's what it's all about. So let's talk about setting the stage. So we talked about how it's really important to set the stage, the foundation, and we'll take a look at that forecast. So this seems real basic to people, but sometimes it's good to take a look. And if you're not in charge of cash forecasting, you're the CFO, you might just want to sit down, right, with your treasury manager, treasurer, and say, I was just on this webinar. Why don't you guys just take me through this? I find this interesting, just to make sure that that we're doing things the right way. Show me how we're doing it and why. You need to identify the type of the forecast. Different types. Again, there's operational, 1 to 30 days. That short-term rolling 13-week forecast. We'll talk about the rolling forecast in a little bit. Medium term, maybe a 12-month rolling, and then that long term, often called the strategic forecast. So we need to identify the type of forecast. So looking at this, we may have multiple forecasts, right, that we're using. That's not a bad thing. Depends on what they're being used for. You just want to make sure that you are not mixing apples and oranges together. You need to define the goals of the forecast. Is it to manage your short-term borrowings, tie to balance sheet forecasting, manage your capital structure, and then your goals, desired level of accuracy. So you need to be able to assess what level of accuracy is going to impact your decision. So where are you at right now? And go through this exercise. How much better would my decisions be regarding XYZ if my level of accuracy was better? So those of you who are in the Treasury realm, you can feel this pain I have as well. Sometimes I'll go back and look at a decision that I thought that I made as a result of that cash forecast that had a negative impact on the company. So I go back and I look and I think, okay, if this would have been closer, oh, I wouldn't have done this. And the other thing is just getting that information at all, right? So getting that information in the forecast, such as we have a payment on a plant in Mexico and it needs to be made in pesos. So just things like that. So it can be level of accuracy, but it can also be in terms of the information that gets into that forecast, and that can be a driver as well. And then we're going really basic on you guys. I'm going to show you some slides from a presentation I made a long time ago. I'm going to date myself here, but I think it really helps you drive things home. And these are exercises that might seem mundane, but if you are a treasury manager or a treasury specialist, if you do some of these things, it will really open your eyes in terms of understanding your cash flows, inflows, outflows, people, process, and systems. And you'll say, man, this is so easy, low-hanging fruit. This is where we can do better. So understanding your inflows and outflows. I've done this myself at a pretty large company. Map your cash flows, identify your inflow sources, outflow sources. And the good news is, with all the technology that we have out there, some of the TMS systems, it's really going to help us in terms of the visibility, which was often a huge struggle when I was back in the Treasury realm as a practitioner. You want to identify who within your company drives these cash flows. What's that diagram? A lot of us did these SOX diagrams, really valuable now. And then you want to identify all systems used to move and record the fund movement. So again, some of you haven't done this before, make this investment. Those of you that may not have done this, you may just go and ask your team, when's the last time that we have really done this? And in today's world, it doesn't take nearly as long as it took me to map my cash flows out. I'm going to confess, it took me like a month to do this for my company. We were operating in 9 or 10 different countries, but it was definitely interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and take a breath here for you guys. Go ahead and launch our first polling question. First polling question is asking you to describe the visibility of cash balances and movements at your company. So again, one of the keys to that effective cash forecasting is understanding the movement of funds, of course, and it's still difficult at some companies in terms of the visibility. Not all companies yet have these great TMS systems. I had my bank system, which was pretty good, but still, I had banks overseas that weren't connected, and I had to wait days, third-party information, so it's really key. I want to remind those of you after CTP credits that you'll have to answer all of our polling questions today during the webinar. And then I also want to remind you that I can take your questions at any time during the webinar. I appreciate those questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds. Then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the results, and then we'll dig into a little bit of mapping cash inflows and outflows. Fair warning to you that those of you that haven't been on a webinar with me in a couple months, I have more polling questions as I'm trying to make things a little more interactive. And what you're also going to see is more articles that I'm being published on these topics after the webinar. So please look for the webinar, the article about the webinar. Let me go ahead and close the polling question. Go ahead and share the results. So looks like we've got the majority, we've got good or somewhat limited, very limited, good in places. You have those blind spots. So there's a really key areas of opportunity. Are there ways to remove those blind spots? What kind of technology is there? Is there a TMS out there or just a solution? And then we see 6% of you have 20/20 vision, and I envy you, as do all of the other people on the webinar. But awesome if you had that 20/20 vision. And now the trick is to translate that 20/20 vision, make sure you have that relevant to the right variables, and then how do we leverage that information to deliver the best possible cash forecast. So thank you very much, everyone, for your consideration in answering the polling question. Let's get back to the cash inflows that I have. So that's making me chuckle. But I just wanted to show you the process that I went through to really, at the very, very base level, your inflows. Just look at all your bank accounts and look at the flows, the currencies, the dollar amounts. So for me, I had locked boxes in Chicago, electronic receipts, AR, electronic funds receipts, a lockbox, intercompany receipts. So really get a handle on those cash inflows. Again, yours may be more complicated. Again, that TMS may help you quite a bit. And then on the other side, of course, mapping your outflows as well. And looks pretty similar. Looks at your bank account structure, so you can see all the different bank accounts that you have, and then all the big drivers of the payments that are going out. AP bank account, what are the key drivers of AP, who are our key vendors, 5, 10, 20 vendors that are going to drive things, and things of that nature. So again, very simple. And this is where I talked about being able to look at your people, your process, and your systems involved in this moving funds in the workflow. So sometimes this can help us in terms of improving that cash forecast and understanding those cash inflows and outflows, which is really a key area, a key foundation of that effective cash forecast. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the cash forecasting framework. This is a fantastic framework. There was a session at the 2017 AFP Annual Conference, Cash Forecasting, a Free Cash Flow Perspective, and the speakers were Jennifer Dale, Assistant Treasurer Sprint, John Dortis, Treasurer Conair, Steve Pollack, Senior Treasury Consultant, PMC Treasury, and Tom Hunt, the Director of Treasury Services at the AFP, a job that I used to have myself. But I really wanted to share their framework because I think it's incredibly insightful. And I have the hyperlink to the presentation there. So I suggest that you take a look at that, and there's a lot more detail. And so I think this is a great way to look at things. So again, setting that framework for that quality. So we got our 4 corners here. What are the things that are going to impact the quality of that forecast? Our drivers, process, and our methodology. Again, what are the key drivers? What's the process? We'll talk about our technology, our data and our tools. What's the quality of our data? What's the timeliness of our data? What's our tools? What's our technology? What about the output, the metrics, and the reporting? So what are our metrics of success? What's the reporting? What are we going to do for analysis of variance? And then also intertwined in that is the behavior in our organization, the way that we get all of the folks involved in our process on the same team, have that centralized project, and then kind of at the top level hub is our model, whether it's a direct or indirect model. I'm not going to get too deep into the how of the forecast. We are going to be doing that on a webinar next month. So if you want more of the how, we will certainly have that next month, and we'll go through the technology that's out there to make this process to really, if you want to dig into the technology and how it's making it easier, we'll be doing that. So really quickly, again, some of this stuff is really basic for some of you guys. Indirect model, it often called top down, can be derived from the P&L balance sheet forecast. It offers a macro view look in the aggregate and then transposes down. So obviously top down, more suited for a medium or long-term forecast, and forecast often starts with sales. So again, you're looking at, okay, what are the objectives of my forecast? I want to look at a medium or long-term forecast. That may tilt me towards an indirect model. Direct models, a bottom-up micro view, looked at segment by business unit, product lines, cost centers. I say, how low do you want to go? How deep do you want to go? More looking for detailed projection of receipts and disbursements, and implementation may require more time and resources. That being said, given the technology that's available now, I myself would be more tilted towards a direct model because to me it's not quite as intimidating given the amount of information and systems that we have. Again, it has to be the right data, but the data is now there. And some folks use, and you can use a combination of both, which is a hybrid approach. So for the purposes of our time today, I'll go ahead and take a look at an indirect model. And again, what I'll share will be from that great presentation that was given at the AFP. So indirect model. The indirect model, if you're looking at a cash flow forecasting direct model, you can look at it as part of a P&L balance sheet forecasting process. When you look at horizon and frequency, usually up to 18 months by quarter, by month, updated monthly or quarterly. So we'll talk about that rolling forecast. And then just there's a lot of information here just on the methodology. You get that, how do we get to that free cash flow number if we're looking at free cash flow, earnings, non-cash items, the changes in operating assets and liabilities, and capital expenditures. Again, I will get you all copies of the presentation so you can maybe print these items out and take a better look, and also access the presentation itself if you want to look at the detail behind the methodology. And so again, and then the drivers, right? These are key to we understand these: operating profit, expense, other income, expense, and operations. So what is it that's really driving these items? What kind of visibility do we have in these items? How can we improve our ability to forecast these numbers and how they roll up into that consolidated forecast? And then the process, again, BU function forecast can be part of the process, the consolidation process, and then that variance analysis, and that's a whole webinar in and of itself, right? That variance analysis, very important. And again, technology plays a big key in that variance analysis when you can really drill down into that variance analysis. So one of the things that's going to be important when you get the end result of what you're trying to forecast, you're looking at that variance, and you're going to want to understand the drivers of that variance. If we look above, it could be we're off on operating profit, we're APAR, we're off there. Then you can start to look at the contribution of that variance, and then look at it in terms of there are things I can control and things I can't control. So some of the variance may be driven by factors outside of your company's control. So really the upper bound of the accuracy that you're able to deliver, that can be significant depending on your industry and what you're trying to forecast. And then the process is really one of continuous improvement in that you have that metric. You're always trying to understand that variance and look at those drivers and see how you can really make that improve that number. But again, you still need to look at, even though it might be continuous improvement, you still need to look at the end of the day, how much, what's our goal for the improvement that we have. Obviously, you want to tweak things, and if there's not a lot of cost to it, go ahead and do it. But you have to be mindful of the investment of your resources versus the improvement decision making that results. Behavior in organization. This kind of gets at the governance model. There's a lot of information here. So again, we talked about just another way to look at some of the information we had on the previous slide. You look at your drivers, your labels, and then you start to look at your governance model, and you start to see in terms of that forecast, if we can start to identify how things are rolling up, we can drive some forecast accountability. If you have the right governance model, it can improve the quality of input data, and then it can enable effective variance analysis that drives continuous improvements. So what you're doing here, again, if you start to look at all the drivers and then you say, who's impacting the earnings part of this? The CFOs, business unit CFOs. And then so what are those areas so you can educate them? So if they're directly involved in the process of the forecast, you can get better information for them, communication to them, also communicate the impact that they're having. In some companies, I've seen them actually base compensation on how well they are at forecasting. And so it's really cool. It helps you understand what's driving the forecast and accuracy. And again, the behavior and organization piece of that framework can really have an impact there. And then data and tools, budgeting and planning software and our spreadsheet models are commonly used to input data or create the forecast. So again, you want to look at the technology piece, data and technology. Data, what's the source of the data? What's the quality of the data? What's the timeliness of the data? And you really have to have a data steward in a sense. And so you want to have an understanding if you're letting your business unit folks do the forecast and roll that up, you want to sit down with them, understand how they're doing things, understand their data source, and then the software that you're going to use. There's budgeting and planning software, and so there's really good tools that allow you to represent data, look at the actuals versus the forecast, and then also do some sort of scenario analysis, and that's also what's going to contribute to our business agility. And then the output, the metrics and reporting. So we want to make sure we want to involve management in analyzing variances and then using the information to make strategic decisions. So you want to look at some of the metrics, accuracy, the timely submission of the forecast, and then the reporting, what that can be, forecast versus actual. So all different ways to slice and dice. And then again, in today's world, the metrics and reporting pieces of this are much more cost effective and really level that playing field. But again, it depends on your company, it depends on your industry. How important is the accuracy of that cash forecast? How complicated is that cash forecast? How much and then maybe it's not, maybe you're just not forecasting cash, you're forecasting accounts receivable, accounts payable, whatever it is that you might be forecasting. How important is that to your company's strategic decision making? How does it impact working capital and things of that nature? So again, I love this presentation. So Jennifer Dale, John Durtis, Steve Pollock, Tom Hunt, very well done, very well done. And then if we just take a look at this again, just want to kind of take a look back in terms of, now you look at the accuracy. Now you can see all the things that can impact your accuracy. Okay, my drivers, do I understand my drivers? Does my methodology make sense with my goals? The data, do I have the right data? The timeliness of the data. What kind of analytical tools do I have? Do I need more than Excel? Do I need a FP&A solution? Do I need a ERP module for cash forecasting? What are the outputs in terms of metrics and reporting? Is that giving me the insight so I have the ability to do scenario analysis? And then the behavior and organization, just take a look at those impacts. Are there things that I can change after I map that? How do I incorporate accountability into that framework? So again, that framework is very important. And then what sits on top of that is that indirect or the direct model. So I go a little bit out of order maybe from a logical perspective, but I don't really see a lot on forecasting accuracy. So I just give you a little math here. Mean absolute deviation, MAD. Hopefully you're not mad for being on the webinar today. Is a measure of absolute error of forecast error over time. So that could be a metric. And then you want to look at the percentage. So you want to look at the trend, but then also you want to see, okay, what impact does that have? What's my target? What's my ceiling? And then what's that percentage? So again, I just think it's interesting to look at, people talk about how do I forecast? How do I forecast? How do I forecast? And I don't really see a lot about, okay, accuracy of the forecast. What does that mean? What is the value? What are the metrics that we should be using? And then we have cumulative forecast error, and then average forecast error. So those are just different metrics depending on what your data might look like, and then how many observations or actuals, how many forecasted values are you? Maybe you're looking at more than just forecasting cash in there. So now I'm going to give us another chance for Ernie to take a breath. I'm going to go ahead and launch our second polling question. Again, we talked about how understanding the key drivers of your cash forecasting is important. So I'm asking you to share with us your company's understanding of the key drivers of your company's cash forecasting accuracy. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Those of you after CTP credits, you'll have to answer all of the polling questions here today. So in order to be mindful of our time, again, we've got a lot of content to cover. I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds. Take a quick look at that, and then we'll have some more insights on forecasting accuracy. So go ahead and close the polling question here. So go ahead and share the results. So I guess what I'm seeing here is an opportunity for improvement, so to speak. So it looks to me like there may be some sort of opportunity to look at a technology upgrade. So if it's limited at best, what is that? Is that a function of the data, the technology, the people, adequate but in need of improvement? Okay, what is it that you would need in terms of people, process, excuse me, and technology in order to do that? Or maybe it's the skill set of your team. What is the class that I could take to do? And then I like to see 34% good, and then of course 15% fantastic. So again, I guess my first thought is that there's opportunity there. So I said you'll be able to identify opportunities to improve your cash forecast. Here it is. Take a look at what's out there in terms of the technology that's available. One, to give you visibility if you're doing that top up, gives you that detail, and also on the analytical side, it could be a game changer. Now let's go ahead and take a look at forecasting accuracy. Again, just some observations. A few takeaways. This is a good slide. This is from a presentation, calculating financial forecast accuracy, improving you and your company's forecast performance. There's a hyperlink there in the additional resources as well. That's a core online course at Illumio. I would encourage you to take a look at that course as well. Very good information there. So financial forecasting is more about variance management, like I said, than the actual percentage. And so again, how does it impact the quality of your decision? You need to always be looking to improve your model. You need to incorporate information from the field, right? We always say, I want data-driven decision making. That's fine, but some of our folks have great insights that are kind of inherent insights, and so you want their insights to be backed up by data, but that doesn't mean that you want to ignore those insights. It's about measuring both accuracy and volatility, and then understanding the key resources and causes of volatility. Again, take action. And then, as I said before, forecasting accuracy and the timeliness of that is really going to impact your business agility. And then just a few ways for forecasting accuracy ROI. You can use that. I am an economist. I hate to admit that. Shh, don't tell anybody. I have a master's degree in economics. You wouldn't know it by listening to me speak, probably. You can use elasticity formula, something for every 1% change in the forecast, what would have been the change in profitability. Again, put that metric on there quantitatively, and you want to make sure to measure both positive and negative effects on an ongoing basis. So a little bit of summarization of a tremendous amount of content we've covered so far. In terms of the right method and workflow, you need to understand the current and intended purposes of your forecast, understand your data, sources, accuracy, identify the sources of variance within your current forecast and the sources you can control. You don't want to fit a model or procedure to your needs and data. Let your objectives and data drive the process, not the technology. And this should probably be up higher. Identify professional colleagues who face your challenges and engage them to identify the best practices for your company. So in today's world, of course, we all have AFP in our local AFPs, but LinkedIn, you can post questions into groups. You can, if you're in the retail industry, you can find a treasury manager at a similar size company, retail, ask them, have you been, how do you do things? And people are oftentimes very receptive. To me, there's no one more valuable than someone who's already been through the challenges that I face. You can actually find someone that has the same ERP system that you have, just dig in there. And so when you're looking to run that project or do this, maybe a transformation project, please look out to your professional colleagues. Go on LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation about how to do that. I think it's very underleveraged in our profession. So I'm going to switch gears now. We're going to switch gears a little bit to rolling forecast. Before we do that, I'm going to kind of set the stage and see where you guys are in terms of rolling forecast. So I'm asking you if your company has adopted a rolling forecast. And again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Those of you who are interested in CTP credits, of course, you'll need to answer all of our polling questions. And of course, we would like to have your questions, which you can put in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this up for like 4 or 5 more seconds in order to be mindful of our time. Give us a quick look and go ahead and close that and share. So this kind of gives me a sense of how quickly to go through my next parts of the presentation, rolling forecast. Looks like 30% of you are well established. So it looks like this next part could be tremendously valuable for those of you who have not done that yet or in the process of implementing. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be very, very quick rolling forecast, what it is, and then I'd like to share with you 7 factors of success from a valued colleague of mine, Larissa Melnichuk, the CEO of FP&A Trends, International FP&A Board, just has these tremendous success tips, which I'm going to share with you as well. Those are good slides to print out. So rolling forecast, again, you look at your first review, let's say you're doing an example of a 5 quarterly rolling forecast out 5 periods, and then what we do is we update the forecast with our actuals. So one of the key things here is that we are not setting that goalpost. So it's not like we're cramming this. So it's not only looking at that budget and that stake in the ground. Things are changing. So what we want to do is we want to take the best available information that we have. Reforecast, of course, a key to this is also going to be that you have the efficiency in your forecast to produce this rolling forecast, becoming more and more popular. I've seen in a few surveys that I've been involved with, the number is pretty high, but unfortunately what I'm seeing is that folks aren't really leveraging the information to improve their decision making just yet. So again, I'd like to review these rolling forecast success factors. Thank you to Larissa Melnichuk, FP&A Trends, and the International FP&A Board. This is just a great way to go, especially if you're considering it or you're in the process of doing it, or if you want to go back and look at how your process is set up and look for areas of improvement. I love this, and of course, this is also applicable to your forecasting process as well, because all of these factors can have impacts on the quality. So one is culture. You need to have that culture of continuous improvement. There has to be this perception, which is the reality. It's not a measurement, it's a management tool, so it's important. So we're not just trying to get out a number. It's a management tool. It helps our decision making, and that needs to be understood. So the value of that, the efforts that you put into that rolling forecast is important to convey across the enterprise. Obviously, people are important, but you also want to look at Treasury and FP&A. You also want to see if you have the right people, if you're going to invest in it, if you see potential to offer great value to your company. So where you are, Maybe on the lower end, if you get to the higher end, you might see tremendous value. Do you need to update the people skills? So the skills you want to look for, can they see the big picture? They have good communication skills. You often have to communicate across departments. Are they analytical? Can they build models? And are they business partners? Can they play nicely with others, which is difficult in some organizations? Can they play well with others within your department, but also across the enterprise? Quality people, systems, and models. So you want to, if possible, you want to be based on analytics. You want them to be driver based. You want to be careful to avoid black boxes. Technology can be a trap. And you want to keep this in-house in Treasury and finance and keep that ownership and visibility. You got to have the quality process. You want to design out bias. We want less judgment, more analytics. So where possible, if you're rolling up BAU forecasts, should be automated through drivers, projects, initiatives, and should be based on clear assumptions. The design, this is what I really love. A colleague of mine, or colleague, I should say, a connection of mine, great speaker, Matthias from Maris, shared his forecasting design. I love this. I love this slide. Visibility needs to be forward-looking, agility, easy identification and correction, control, balanced scorecard driven, and simplicity, removal of all the necessary details. So in terms of your design, visibility, agility, control, simplicity. Again, I think this is, seems simple, but some of these slides are incredibly powerful. You want to integrate the rolling forecast, the top-down and bottom-up process are harmonized. So usually that hybrid process works what works best, and you want to have a environment of collaboration and the technology to do so. The technology that's out there is absolutely fascinating. You can collaborate in real time, send messages, identify bottlenecks, automatic emails that go out. What's the progress of certain things going on? So it's fascinating. So that's then a quick on the rolling forecast. I apologize for the quick run through there, but I wanted to mention it because it's obviously duration is very important. There's a lot being said about rolling forecast. Now, in theory, it's allowing folks to do this because of the technology, the data, but also the information, right? There's a lot of information that's free that wasn't free before. There's ways to communicate with your colleagues that have done this before. So this is something, if you're not doing this right now, this is a consideration. And then these 7 key factors of success are always important. Again, whether you're looking to do it in the process of doing it or whether you're doing it right now and you're trying to look at that continuous improvement, are we doing this? If not, why not? So let's take it back to cash forecasting. So again, the way that I like to couch this is, okay, I'm on the webinar. I'm interested in cash forecasting. I want to get better. All right. Assess where you are right now, where do you want to go, and what do you need to get there. So document the resources you have to assist you in delivering and executing a sustainable cash forecasting process. So look at what you have, people directly contribute, cash flow forecasting and its accuracy, technology, which systems do you have to provide input and output, and what are the processes that you have and policies that are involved in defining the forecast process. So again, I like to take you down to the weeds. If you haven't been down the weeds, you got to get down the weeds with me. So people, process, technology, and then this will help us see where those gaps exist and how we can fill those gaps. So again, what I also said earlier was now when we look at where we want to go, first thing we need to do is look at our inherent barriers. 1, see if we can remove them without much cost, and 2, see if we can remove them and what that cost benefit analysis might be. But these are things that just inherently negatively impact that cash forecast. People, individuals who affect forecasting do not understand or do not care. We have to identify these people, and we need to show them the value that they offer, why they're doing it, or tie that to their compensation. You can have a lack of internal support from executives. I think that's a hurdle that's not quite as common. And the people involved in the process play nicely with each other, either interdepartmental or intradepartmental. So you have to look at these forecasts if they exist. If you own that forecast, you better start watching Dr. Phil because you're going to have to help people play nicely with each other. And then the process, inherent barriers could be processes by their very design facilitate the reporting or recording of untimely or inaccurate data. So an example, if you're going bottom up, you're looking at APAR. Sometimes the processes really compete with each other. They're anything that's designed in a silo. So you want to look at those processes some processes compete each other. And then again, individuals or processes that impact the accuracy, and the people that own those processes or drive those processes don't care. Okay, now we're going to give you a little polling question on the technology front. Before we talk about that a little bit, asking you to share with me the primary technology your company uses for cash forecasting. Is it Excel, a TMS or Treasury workstation, ERP? Maybe you're leveraging a FP&A, CRM, and BI solution, or other. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this polling question up for another few seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look at the results, talk about some inherent barriers in terms of technology, and then we'll start to wrap things up with some closing comments and also some additional resources. So let's go ahead and close that. And then we're going to share the results. And then we have a big majority, almost 2/3 of you are still using Excel. And there are still reasons to use Excel. Again, it depends on your company. Where you stand depends on where you sit, right? But this is a great opportunity in terms of improving that cash forecast, just the functionality that is out there, whether you want to look at the functionality in terms of the TMS, CPM, FP&A solutions. I think that's a tremendous opportunity. Again, Excel is a powerful tool in the right hands, but that's another webinar. But I think that's an opportunity. So what we had seen in our FP&A survey is there was still a preponderance of Excel, even in the FP&A world, which is, I believe, in the 65 percentile. But again, what I'd love to see as a Treasury professional is us get off of this reliance on Excel and take our game to the next level. So let me go ahead and get back to the technology inherent barriers. Systems don't communicate effectively with each other, or don't facilitate communication. More than one version of the truth, Excel. Access to no system that allows direct collaboration between parties, Excel. Current technology does not meet needs in terms of timeliness and accuracy, so I'm not trying to bash on Excel. Some companies, that might be what they need, but I think the majority of companies would do well to at least take a look at what's out there in terms of the technology available. And then in terms of doing that gap analysis, so you want to see what those gaps are and what you need to exceed the expectations of your forecast. People, who do you need to get on board on terms of the purse strings? Do you need to redeploy people or engage new internal or external people to get you where you want to be and keep you there? Processes, what existing policies and procedures need to revise, and do you need new ones? And then what's the impact of those folks? How do we get them on board? And then technology, what's out there, the systems you need to communicate better, access. But the good thing about looking at the technology side of it is you can collaborate, right? If you don't own FP&A, you should have a conversation with your FP&A colleagues, and if they're still using Excel, or they might have a cloud-based system that you could really use and leverage and improve that cash forecast. So that's an action item right there. For me, if I'm a Treasury professional on the webinar, if I'm using Excel for my cash forecast, and we have an FP&A team, I'm going to walk over there and see what systems they're using, and if they're using some sort of tool that could really help me upgrade my game as well. So some cash forecasting best practices. These come from a session at the AFP annual conference as well. So cash forecasting, member perspectives and best practices, 2017 AFP annual conference. Again, some of these seem like common sense, but they're good to have. Clear communication. Success depends on business partnering. Again, this is becoming a whole area. It's amazing to me. There is a whole area of study on business partnering, and it's pretty enlightening. I've spoken on it a few times, so I would suggest that might be worth your time because we have to collaborate effectively across the enterprise. And I was in Treasury, and believe me, it was not easy. You want to monitor and share metrics, communicate those, and you want to have an ongoing dialogue to create a culture of continuous improvement. Want to make sure you have a focus, analyze data that matters, dates and periods of time that matter most. And then you want to look at efficiency and automated, identify what can and can't be automated, automate what you can, but don't do it all at once. Excel users, automation, this can be a key value component of your value proposition. Identify key stakeholders and involve them in the process. I say this when I'm helping people make a business case for anything. So if you're going to do this transformation, this process, anything that's going to impact someone, you want to identify them, involve them in the process. And who is the most important person that you engage? Mr. or Mrs. No. I think they used to call me Mr. No, I'll confess. But those are the people you want to get on board. So you have two constituencies, the people that control the purse strings, and then the people who are going to be impacted by your project. So you want to earn their buy-in. So one of the ways to do that is to involve them early and often, and then disarm them of the objections that they have. You need to know what your goal is, then determine which alternative is best suited. I don't know, bottoms up, I don't know if that's good for a webinar. Maybe after this one, bottom up or top down. Automate where possible. Reconcile across various forecasts. Perform stress test modeling for worst case scenarios. Evolve your process and work with businesses to understand connection to cash. So those 10 cash forecasting best practices, those come directly. Those of you who are AFP members, those come directly from your AFP members. So I think those are things that are definitely want to be key takeaways for you. More best practices, understand correlating relationships, disclose assumptions, use the appropriate platform, and finally, of course, ensure the forecast is usable. So all these things are coming directly from if you're Treasury colleagues, if you're a CFO, Office of the CFO. Again, these are the people that do what you're doing in the cash forecasting world, and we want to reach out to them individually. I bet you we can use LinkedIn and do that. And I'm going to, real quick, some resources, connecting with your practitioners. I got some LinkedIn groups there. You can have an intensive seminar on cash forecasting mechanics if you want to do it that are specific to your company. I've got some of the annual conference sessions, hyperlink that I use. AFP conference sessions are great. Bank partners, TMS providers, treasury consulting firms. Again, cash forecasting is not easy. I didn't teach you everything you needed to know today, but I'm trying to give you other avenues of resources to pursue. On-demand courses, many good providers. Illumio is one of those. I reference some of those other references that we have. Some closing thoughts. Again, I got a lot of closing thoughts, but some of these are just good things to print out. Define your goals, understand your data, go out and connect with folks that have the same challenges, access your current resources to meet goals, identify your inherent barriers, perform a gap analysis, and do a business case for forecasting accuracy and sell it. So I really don't have too much time for our Q&A because I had so much content to go through today. I do have one final polling question I would like to launch before we wrap things up. I always like to ask a question. If you had more money, how would you allocate that? So if the Treasury Fairy came down and gave you $100,000, what would you do with the additional funds? So interesting to see whether some of your gaps, is it more about your systems? Is it more about your the skill of your team, or is it more about maybe you want to go out and hire a consultant? So I'm going to go ahead and leave that up for a few more seconds. And thank you everyone for answering all of our polling questions here today. So a few final comments. First of all, I want to thank once again our webinar partner, Centage, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helped us make this webinar possible. I encourage you to visit the Centage website. They have some great resources. And finally, a big thank you to the audience for your valuable time. Please let us know what we can do better and make the rest of your day great, everyone.